Hello there once again, everyone. Well, it's been a week since I spoke to any of you via YouTube last, apart from people who have sent me private messages and stuff. So I figured out to fill you in on what's been going on over the past week since I haven't made a video. And boy, has it been busy around here. As you can see, I have a Delco car radio right here. This is actually out of the silver 1988 Buick that Bizarre Furhead is driving. And it has started behaving erratically, and I would guess that after about 23 years worth of being frozen and baked in the hot sun and the cold winters, that this thing could stand to have at least its capacitors replaced, and a couple of them are in fact bloated and bad. So after all of these years, I guess it's due for a little bit of an overhaul. And I do think it's worth saving because these are a pretty nice sounding set, and aftermarket sets don't seem to fit well in those cars, even if you have the appropriate adapter and stuff that stores like Best Buy and Crutchfield sell. They just seem to stick out a little too far out of the dash for my liking. Now this wasn't too bad to take apart. The thing that was kind of bad was the wiring. In this case, you can see I made a little bit of a mistake here. I desoldered this thing, and desoldering things in here has been kind of a treat because, as you can see, there's kind of a sealing coating all over that circuit board, and getting that stuff off could probably be accomplished with some chemical. I don't have that chemical, and I imagine that whatever it is might be fairly expensive, so I don't really plan to buy any. I've been getting by just kind of carefully scraping it away from the solder joints, and then everything desoldered much better than it had before I realized that stuff was a problem. I made some more work for myself here than I had to. I desoldered this from the amp board. I actually have the amp board out now, and I'm waiting to receive capacitors for it. When it would have unplugged from this end of this other board over here much more simply. But it was no big loss because I had to desolder the wires going to the power switch, because the power connector for the unit is on the amp board as well. I also had to desolder this. I think this goes somewhere to the front panel, maybe to the bass and treble controls. And I also had to desolder this going to the volume control on the set. So that's one thing I've been working on. Now this is a whole other project. This is the remains of a Bose Wave radio. You see, I always kind of wanted one of these after one of my friends got one as a graduation gift back in the day. Well, they go for crazy amounts of money, even secondhand on eBay. So I picked this one up. This is a first generation Bose Wave radio without CD from YouTube user 45 player. And when he sent it to me, he said, well, you know, it works fine, but when you first plug it in, it makes this kind of farting noise. And I would almost consider it, I suppose you could call it that, but I'd consider it more along the lines of the sound one of those old hit and miss engines makes when it's running really fast. I did find that if I put the memory backup and clock backup batteries in place, that it would start up properly every time. Now the tuning on this set never really worked very well, even on very strong local stations that other receivers can pick up without an antenna. And then things just kind of got worse from there until it eventually led up to a total and complete power supply failure. Now he recapped this thing, but it looked like there were a few places on this board where the capacitors had leaked and damaged other components. Two of the most notable, this diode right here, which tested good but looked really, really nasty and corroded, and this diode over here, which was all rusty inside and tested open. I don't imagine that it started out that way. I had really hoped that replacing that open diode, which is in a part of the power supply circuitry, might get it running again. But it's not running again. It's still completely lifeless and dead to the world. And in the case of this diode, D405, which is in the filament supply for the display, it's been hot enough over the years that it's kind of caused the circuit board to become bleached and discolored there. You can see it right at the tip of my thumb. And so I think Bose was actually running some things close to their limits in this radio. But as it stands right now, I know the power supply is not being loaded down excessively. I just know that I've got no power, and I've been kind of puttering around with this thing, troubleshooting it, and if I'm not successful, YouTube user 45 player has offered to take it back and have a look at it and see if he can get it to go again. So I'm sure that one way or another, this radio will definitely sing again. And I've made a little improvement to my bedroom situation as well. As you might remember, I bought this lovely chair at the Staples office store, and Have had pretty good luck with it. It's held up really well. The Keykeeper and I had a heck of a blast assembling it, if you ever watched that video. Anyway, the only problem with it was that it kept bunching up my rug as I rolled it across the floor. You know, while I'm playing rigs of rods or watching the Weasel 2 HTM show on Blog TV or doing something along those lines. And that just would not do. I was pushing this rug all over the room and I knew that was going to tear it up. What I needed was a chair pad. If you go to an office store and buy a chair pad, you better get ready to reload your wallet because you're sure going to need to. So I was out garage sailing this weekend. One of my coworkers is moving away. And I came up with this chair pad for a very, very reasonable price. Just $5 if you can believe it. And it's not quite as big as I'd hoped, but beggars can't be choosers. And it certainly makes rolling the chair on the carpet a much more reasonable proposition. Oh, the summer heat has definitely come back with a vengeance. We got a real nice reprieve. What was it, about a week, 2 weeks ago, somewhere in there? I think it's been 2 weeks ago now. Now it's back up in the 90s again. On Thursday, we peaked a high of 102 degrees in the afternoon. I don't know where everybody is today. The Keykeeper, Furhead, and my mother are all gone. My dad's at work, so at least I know where he's at. But I've got the whole place to myself, which means I can engage in behavior that others find annoying. Oh, let's see. We've had some furnace adventures. I'm sure you can see the nasty old blower wheel that's sitting out here. My grandfather's Singer furnace had a little mechanical foible. We knew that one of the bearings was going bad, and it doesn't help matters that for all the time that he's lived in that house, he's had the furnace fan running basically constantly. As long as there was power, that thing was on. We did oil the bearings periodically, but that furnace dates from around 1974, from what we've been able to find, and I guess the bearing finally gave up. But what it ended up doing to his original blower wheel, which is not this. This is a nasty, rusted, rotten blower wheel from an abandoned furnace out in the basement of one of the farmhouses that we were robbing parts off of. When his bearing failed, it actually started to seize up and do a lathe-like job of cutting into this blower wheel drive shaft. So we took the, it also got so bad that it actually damaged the three-legged tripod-style framework that held the fan in on one end, and then of course it started making this horrific noise. Well, the Keykeeper, Bizarre Furhead, and my dad all got together, and there's going to be a video about this, although it's going to require some truly heroic editing to fix it up, because it wasn't that well shot, because it's very difficult to work in the old basement of that farmhouse, where they liberated this fan and found that the bearings were amazingly still good on this, still packed with grease and everything. So they robbed the bearings, they took the piece of framework off here, and they tried with a cutting torch to heat this up and try to get this shaft to release, but they never were able to get that done, so they had to go to a machine shop and get a new shaft made. But they grabbed some bar stock, cut it to the size needed, set it all up, and installed it back in the fan for him, and everything is hunky-dory with that old furnace again. We have this old Armstrong battery equipped, that is to say crank start, if you're not familiar with the old joke about the Armstrong battery. Alice Chalmers tractor here in town, because it's got a bit of a problem. The ignition system on this tractor probably needs a tune-up. It probably hasn't had any kind of service done on it since, oh, I don't know, probably several presidents ago at least. I would imagine that maybe the last time this thing was serviced properly was sometime around the time that Eisenhower was president. Now, that's not to say we don't keep it greased and things like that, but tune-ups and stuff on this stuff, since none of us are directly involved in the farming except for our father, there isn't a whole lot of attention. There isn't the attention that should be paid to maintenance on these things. Like you can see, there's this choke lever on the carburetor here is completely disconnected, which makes it a whole lot of fun to try and adjust that. But it's not so bad because you're out front trying to start the tractor anyway. So this thing could probably use an ignition system overhaul, but what it needs right now, you can see there's no belt on this belly mower, and I think, don't quote me on this, that this is actually a Woods Brothers mower setup. Well, we've got the belt. The belt is not a problem at all, because the belt is actually all the way over there, sitting in that plastic lawn chair. The problem is the pulley. This mower was set up kind of strangely. I don't know if somebody was just using parts that they had kicking around. We have not owned this tractor since it was new. It was something that was purchased used and came with the mower on it, so we didn't do the initial mower setup. But what's going on here, on our other Alice Chalmers tractor, the one with the electric start on it at the other farm, the mower is driven using this side output of the PTO shaft. Well, this one wasn't done that way. It looks like somebody did a little bit of custom work here using some scrap angle iron and things like that, and they actually arranged it such that this mower was driven off of the rear power takeoff pulley, which is not the greatest design in the world, because we've had this belt want to slip off of here. You know, it's going around a pretty severe angle, and belts tend not to like that. They also tend not to like to turn corners too well, so this thing has not exactly been trouble-free from the onset. But we haven't had any luck getting the parts from Woods Brothers to try and set it up for a sideways drive application, and the pulley eventually started to wallow out the mating surfaces that it has with this splined drive shaft. Its own splines started to get worn and wallowed out, and then eventually it just quit working, period. It just started slipping badly and couldn't even drive the mower any longer. So we're looking at getting a replacement pulley for that and trying to set this thing up so that it will be at least some semblance of useful. Which brings me to my truck. My truck is being a very naughty truckling. About last week sometime, I was out and about driving on, and all of a sudden the service engine soon light kicks on, and I thought, well, you know, maybe I left the fuel cap loose, because I have done that a few times. Nope, I've lost the first oxygen sensor on the second bank of cylinders. That'd be the pre-cat sensor. It says that the heater circuit is open. The truck is definitely not running as well as it used to, so I'm trying not to drive it too much. Also, I've got brake trouble on the truck. I put Napa's cheapest brake pads on here at the suggestion of the key keeper, and oh boy, was that a mistake. I should not have done that. I should have splurged and gotten the more expensive pads, because those things have been noisy since day one. Now they're really noisy, and they're basically down to bare metal. They are making the wear indicators make little cricket noises, and it's been doing that for about the past month. And I've been talking to a body man about this. I was driving down the highway one day. You can see that little chip there. Luck of all luck. Guy was mowing in the ditch, and all of a sudden a rock came out at hyper speed. I didn't have time to stop then. Tried stopping by the place later, and they denied even owning a mower that matched the description of the one I gave. So I don't think they wanted to be responsible for it. And of course I've got this rotten cab corner down here that I've also been in discussions to have fixed, because I'm really not ready. Even though this is basically an 8-year-old truck now, which seems impossible to believe, I'm really not ready to just let it start rusting out like crazy yet. And I've got some other rust problems going on as well. I've got little bubbles coming in the paint here above this rear wheel well, and I know why that's happened. Somehow or another I wasn't getting this quite clean enough up here when I took it to the car wash. I wasn't always getting all the crap purged out of here, and so it held moisture against the inside of the metal. And sure enough, it's rusting right through the paint now. And the farmall, a lot of the painting's been done, although the base tractor itself has not been painted, and I don't know if Bizarre Furhead's got any plans to do that. But we've got a lot of electrical gremlins to chase down on this thing. It doesn't charge, somebody's bypassed the fuse, and all this wiring is kind of old and rotten, plus some of these contacts are pretty grungy in here. So I'm going to get out some hookup wire and start rewiring this per the schematic in the manual. It's also my intention, there was originally a fuse in here that protected the headlights, which will also have to be rewired, as you can see right there. There's bare wire touching the metal right there, which is probably what led somebody to bypass not only bypass, but remove the fuse holder completely from the tractor. So I intend to put the fuse back in there, and I also intend to arrange it such that the entire charging system is protected, if at all possible. Let's see, what else is there to talk about in this little video blog thing that I'm doing? I realize all the cool kids call these things vlogs, but hey, depending on your take, it's either Huey Lewis in the News or Sesame Street. It's hip to be a square. That house over there has been foreclosed upon, And the people who live there actually just kind of quietly agreed to give it up because that house actually has a lot of problems. It's got sewage backing up into the basement on a regular basis, and they've got animals getting into the house. It also looks to me like maybe, yeah, I think maybe it's had some storm damage there. It looks like some of the siding's been blown loose, which is kind of odd because we really haven't had a terribly strong storm. As you can see, though, the lawn hasn't been mowed in a while. And I know how much the city seems to love that, but apparently nobody's felt the need to turn this in because nothing's been done about it. We actually called up the company that holds the mortgage to it and said, you know, hey, this yard really needs to be badly mowed because as you can see, we've got some ersatz trees sitting over there. And we never heard anything back out of them. You know, we said, oh, we'll mow this and we'll mow it for a fee and we'll mow it cheap. But I guess they weren't too interested in that, so I guess it's going to continue growing apace until maybe the city decides to break down and do something about it. But lest I say too much of the truth, the city's probably not going to do that because it would interfere with their ability to do nothing. And then there's this little yellow house over here. This used to belong to a little old lady. She began to put a lot of money in it to fix it up. It's got a new roof on it. It's got some other new things in it. And then she became unable to live at home any longer. She moved out into a senior home, assisted living, and then some people bought this house. Well, see, I kind of mind my own business. I don't pay attention to what people are doing. I've got enough to do to keep myself busy, and I don't need to meddle in the affairs of others. So I hadn't even noticed that this house, which is right next to the Roach Palace, has had nobody living in it for quite a while now, probably about a month. And I don't know what happened there. My dad came over here and apprised me of the situation because he said there was a note in the door that said it had been foreclosed upon, but I don't think that's what's happened. The note actually says that the property is going to be considered abandoned in 3 days if the tenant does not take care of it. And should that happen, the mortgage company will change the locks and assume control of the property. So I'm not sure, but it looks like they just kind of quietly walked away from this house. They actually left stuff behind, which is kind of surprising. This portable basketball hoop, which there doesn't appear to be anything wrong with. As you can see, the yard's not been mowed in a while, the bushes haven't been trimmed. Which is too bad because it's a nice little house. And I'm thinking that if it has been abandoned, I'm going to find out who holds the mortgage on it and try to consult with them about possibly buying it. But that's not the weirdest thing. The power's been shut off to this house. Maybe the water has too. I don't know. The weird thing is almost every window on this house is open. Now the autofocus won't work properly here, or at least it won't work quite like it should. But as you can see, the house is deserted inside. Oh, there's the bathroom window. It's completely open. A window to the bedroom right there. Nice little older train condensing unit that still works quite well, or at least it did the last time it was used. Although the fuse box is open. Nope, there's fuses in there. Well, I can't get it to shut. It must be stuck. But yeah, it's kind of funny. There's nothing obviously wrong with this house. It doesn't smell like anything bad happened. Doesn't look like anything bad happened. Looks like one day they just never came home. And in fact, I saw somebody here with a pickup truck and a trailer moving odds and ends of furniture out. But nothing that suggested they were completely leaving the house. Switch this thing over to manual focus here and actually try to have a look inside the bedroom. As you can see, there's a door off its hinges in there. But there aren't any holes in the walls. Nothing's been torn up. There's no evidence that the roof is leaking or anything like that. So it's very, very strange. I left this little glider framework sitting here. Left some junk on the back patio area. A Nerf football that looks like it was Spider-Man inspired or something. And then here in the kitchen, here in the kitchen, you can see a fly strip, and you can see that they actually left, whoops, that's not working very well. Let's try this again here. You can actually see that they left. I'm having a real good time focusing in on the screen. Can't really get those cabinets to focus, but as you can see, they definitely left the doors open. So yeah, I'm thinking about maybe picking this house up because the Roach Palace is not really livable, and I need to get a plan going on this. It's been too long, and I want to get this place emptied out and completely torn down, because even though I'm trying to keep it up, it's a bit of an uphill battle, as you can see. Got somebody came along and broke my window, and it's been a couple of weeks now, and I haven't heard anything about getting it fixed from the hardware store, so I'm probably going to have to bug them. Now there is one more thing I'd like to talk about, and this one requires a little bit more explanation. There's actually two stories behind what you're seeing here, and I'll explain everything in just a moment. First of all, when I was younger, I used to enjoy pretending to be many, many different things. I had all these different fantasies about, being an auto mechanic, a farmer, anything really. I was even in the beer business a few times when I was playing in the bathtub as a youngster. And while I've settled down and gotten a job in the field of computing and information technology, I've never really lost that youthful desire to play in many different fields, even though I'm only an expert and gainfully employed in one. And luckily, being gainfully employed and having access to eBay, however minimally gainfully employed that might be, does allow me to pick up a few nice things here and there. What you're looking at here is just kind of a theory that I'm playing with right now. You see, YouTube user Weasel2HTM has been doing a live show over on Blog TV where he tells some entertaining stories, offers some commentary, takes requests, and basically runs through things that are in his personal collection of music, like records, tapes, and CDs. And this kind of picked up my interest once again in doing something like that, because one of the things that I did as a youngster, I used to sit in front of my dad's stereo system and play my own tapes and CDs. I wasn't allowed to touch the record player back then. And I pretended to be the DJ of the best radio station in the whole wide world. And I've had people tell me that with the voice I've got and the way that I speak that maybe I should be on the radio, but I've never explored that possibility because doing it professionally really doesn't appeal to me a whole lot. But I don't mind tinkering with the idea, and like I say, my interest was perked up again by YouTube user Weasel2HTM, who was going out on Blog TV Thursday nights, usually around 5:45 p.m. Central Standard Time if you want to watch it, and he would run through his music collection, tell stories, take requests, and do things like that. Well, I've been there since his first show. My brothers, Bizarre Furhead and the Keykeeper, have also been there, as well as YouTube user Sentex Video. Now, I can't speak for anyone other than my brothers and myself, but I know that we've all enjoyed his show. And so I thought, maybe I should go out on Blog TV and just try my hand at doing my own show. Just see what would happen. How bad could it be? Famous last words. So that's what I'm playing with right here. And I've got sitting on the floor here a Dell Dimension E521 computer system. This was actually something that some customers of mine, I don't know where I come up with some of the things I say sometimes, but some customers of mine had this machine and it got blitzed by lightning through the modem. Blew chips off the modem board, blew the motherboard, and they just decided they were going to replace it with a new one, that they were ready for something new. At the time, which was probably 2 or 3 years ago, I thought this system was probably worth the investment of a new motherboard, especially since everything else inside it seemed to be unhurt. And so I re-enlivened this system, and since it's one of the more powerful machines that I own, it actually got pressed into service for my little Blog TV experiment, which so far has only been an experiment. Like I say, I don't know that I'm actually going to go through with this. Weasel2HTM has kind of been passing around the idea of maybe even having me co-host on his show. I would certainly do that if he wants me to, or if it seems like it would be an interesting thing to do, so we might just be trying that out. It's hard to tell. But there are a couple things I've done to this computer in order to make it ready. First of all, I've installed a dedicated audio card, and there is a reason for that. The reason being that the onboard AC97 and HD audio solutions that most motherboards have are basically software sound cards. They can't do anything in hardware by themselves. Their driver has to do practically everything for them. like audio capture, sample rate conversion, everything, audio processing effects, it all has to happen in the driver. And when you've got a machine that you're keeping good and busy, say encoding media for streaming to the rest of the internet, you need every processor cycle you can get. And so I have completely ignored this machine's onboard audio and instead opted for a true hardware-based sound card. That's an Oriel Vortex 2 that's sitting down there. Down below that is a Phoebe Micro TV Master plus FM, and this was actually sent to me by YouTube user Max Arcade. He sent this to me along with the K-Pro computer that he demonstrated in one of his videos because he offered to send me some miscellaneous option cards. I was really surprised to see something like this in there. It does work quite well, and in fact, as just kind of a test here, I've been using this good old Samsung camcorder here. This is actually a blast from the early 1990s. It's completely functional except for the fact that the tape mechanism doesn't work in it. It needs belts. But the composite video output, the zoom lens, everything else works just as well as it did when it was new. The viewfinder has got a little bit of character. It tends to flicker on and off from time to time. But it is basically functional, and I suspect that most of its issues are due to bad connections or maybe even weak solder joints, because this thing that it's mounted to does swivel back and forth, and maybe it just finally had enough of that over the years. Now, I wasn't too impressed with this camcorder at first because it seemed to have really lousy color rendition, and it also seemed to have an extremely narrow field of view. Even at its maximum wide-angle setting, the image seemed very small. But I guess there must have been a problem with my video monitor or something, because when I hooked it up to this computer, everything was a lot better. The colors were better, the field of view was average for one of these camcorders. Of course, that process was not without its problems either. When I first set this card up using the Phoebe Micro provided drivers, which are probably very little changed from the original Brooktree or Conexant drivers, I found that this thing would drop the computer into a stop error every time I tried to change the video input source. And I wasn't having any luck getting it to work at all, and I wondered if maybe it might be broken or something. Well, it turns out the card is actually okay. It's the drivers that were to blame. Luckily, a very nice person from some years back put together a set of drivers based on the original Brooktree and Conexant reference code and called them the BT WinCap drivers. Not only do those drivers add a lot of features to any of these cards that are based on a Brooktree or Conexant 848 or 878 chip or compatible, they also correct an awful lot of bugs, and the bug that I think that was getting me here was one to do with a multiprocessing issue. Specifically, the original drivers are said not to be safe to use on multiprocessing systems. And that would definitely be relevant here because this system does have a dual-core processor in it. So with the computer out of the way, here's a little more on the audio setup. This was an eBay find. This is the Newmark Studio Master Control Center, model number DM1300. And as you can see, it's in pretty good shape. It's pretty clean. There's a few scuffs and scratches and boo-boos, but for something that dates from either the late 70s or early 1980s, it is in phenomenal condition. And it also came with this simple little realistic cardioid microphone, which actually works pretty well and seems to have pretty decent sound quality for what it is. Now I'm feeding the audio that comes out of the Newmark device both into the computer and into a Technics SA210 stereo receiver, which is in turn driving two cheap JCPenney speakers that really don't sound at all bad for what they are. I found these hiding in a dark corner of my basement. I have no idea where they came from, but they seem to work just fine for this little application, and they actually sound a lot better than you'd expect them to. Now I have two of them hooked up, but the other one is over in kind of a mess because this is my computer junk room and it's only been hastily cleaned up, so we're just not going to look at that. How's that sound? My table setup here is actually not quite what I'd like it to be. While I've got enough room for the computer monitor and the keyboard and the mouse, the stereo receiver, the little DJ mixer thing, and a CD player, which maybe I already mentioned, but there you have it, I don't have any room for a turntable here. So I need to get a larger table. I have one out in the garage that's got a wobbly leg on it that I think I can fix. I picked it up off the curb, and it would certainly be more than long enough. I was initially going to get a little old elementary-style school desk that I had out on the front porch. I can't find it now. Somebody must have absconded with it. I don't know. Now here you can actually see the results of the video capture. This is what it looks like. And it's really not too bad. The colors look a little washed out from what you're seeing through the lens of the Handycam here. But in reality, the color saturation and intensity are really quite good. Now those little rolling lines of interference that you might be able to see there are actually in the picture. And I don't know if that's because I have a grounding problem somewhere, or if my ultra-long analog video cable is actually picking up some interference or causing the signal to be weakened. I didn't think I would use this Samsung camcorder at first, but it does appear to give a good enough result that I just might. Here you can see the front of the little Sharp CD player, which is just a simple and cheap little job with a cute orange backlit display, and then Technics SA210 stereo receiver on the top. I'll go ahead and give you a demonstration here of how this looks and works. I don't really have my levels set perfectly yet, I'm still working on that, but this will give you an idea of how things sound at the very least. So I'll turn on the CD here, and then I can go ahead and fade it up. And then fade it back down again. And this thing seems to work very, very well. So whatever I end up doing, that's the story of the stuff that I've been playing with on the computer and audio electronics front.